Hello, everybody. My name is Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News. Today, I'm here with Monica Tranel, a two-time USA Olympian and gold medalist rower who is now running for Congress in Montana. Monica, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Kat, for taking some time and really appreciate this opportunity to reach your audience.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to talk today. So tell me a little bit about your background and how it led to today you running for the House.
So I grew up on a ranch in eastern Montana with my nine siblings, and out in the country, we didn't have an address. We had a post office box. When my family moved to the county where I went to middle school, we raised a population of the county 1%. I had as many siblings as I did classmates. So I know rural America. It's where I grew up. It's what I call home. It's what formed me very much. And that growing up experience, being very deeply connected to the natural world, sledding under the northern lights and skating on rivers and all of those experiences, I think really got me into rowing as well. I mean, the rowing experience is very much one where you're very much in the world, in the natural world. You know what the weather is because you're living it every day. So I think that that's super connected. And so running for Congress for me from Montana was really a step to have representation and a voice from rural America in the Democratic Congress. I think we very much need to have the voices heard from the people in rural America. And I know rural America, it's my home, it's where I grew up. It's very much something that I want to represent and be a voice and a champion for.
There's a statistic thrown around a lot that men have to be asked maybe once or twice to run for office, but sometimes women have to be asked many times. So I'm always curious to ask women running for office, were there a lot of people telling you to run that you should, enter the race, or was there one pivotal moment where you decided to throw your hat into the ring?
The pivotal moment for me really came when I was working on an energy project for Montana. It was a project that would have brought $200 million of new investment into Montana. And we were working on this project in front of the Utility Commission. And one of the commissioners said, well, those wind turbines are dangerous. They cause cancer and they fly off and they kill people. And my client, who I was working on this project with, turned to me and said, did he just say that? And I thought, oh my gosh, he did just say that. And my client said, I could go anywhere. I don't have to invest in Montana. I don't even have to invest in America. I can go to Colombia. And I thought, that is not the America that I know. I'm an attorney. I have practiced here in Montana for over 2 decades, and decisions really have to be made on facts, the rule of law, and practical experience. And so, to go into a courtroom and to put on your case and to get a fair decision, up or down, you just want it to all be fair and to be sane and rational. And I thought, that's not America. That's not our democratic world. And I'm not going to live in that world without fighting for it. So I decided, I think that was a moment. I didn't decide right then and there I would run for office, but something switched in my brain. And I thought, our elected officials have to be accountable to the people, and they have to be willing to follow the rule of law set out in our Constitution and be fair and make decisions based on the facts and the law. That's who we are as Americans. That's what I believe in, and that's why I ultimately got into this race. But nobody asked me to run. I mean, nobody said, "Hey, this is something that you should do." It's something that I decided to do because I'm from here. I live here. I have one home. It's in Montana. I'm tired of rich people from California, like my opponent, coming here and saying, "Oh, I'm going to represent you." And they don't know anything about the world that we actually live in here in Montana. I live here. I'm raising my kids here. And I pay property taxes. I pay the expenses that are the function of the high cost of housing. I know the issues that we're facing on the ground because this is my home.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the race and your opponent, who you mentioned a little bit before. So I'm assuming that pivotal moment, that story that you were talking about, was before the 2022 election. You ran unsuccessfully for the same seat that you're running for now against the same opponent, Ryan Zinke. So what made you decide to get back in the race this cycle, and what makes you confident you can get to the finish line this time?
In 22, it was an open seat. Montana's the first state in the country to lose a seat and then get it back. And so we had an open seat after the 2020 census. And that was the race that I got into, as you noted. I was the closest race in the country in a Trump plus four or more district without any national money invested in my race. I took on someone who was effectively an incumbent, having won election in Montana, but then having gotten fired by President Trump for ethics violations for his service in the interior. So when he was fired, kicked out of the Department of the Interior, we all thought, that was kind of the end. But then he decided to come back. Ryan Zinke came back and ran in 22, and I was taking on somebody who had a lot of name recognition. I had a competitive primary. I was outraised and outspent. I won the primary by 40 points, but in June, I was standing up a general election campaign against someone with a lot of name recognition, and I had to get my name out there. I had less than half of the money that Ryan Zinke had in 22, but made it a 3-point race. So I had 115,000 votes in Western Montana. That's a lot of people who said they wanted me to be their representative. And my name recognition really still wasn't quite where I needed it to be. So we looked at it as we were coming on strong. The political reports were changing the characterization of the race, even up to the, few weeks before the election. So we were really coming on strong and getting our message out there. And the more people who knew me, the closer the race got. So we just ran out of time. And so I looked at it as, we set out to climb a high mountain and we almost did it. And it felt like I needed to come back and finish the job. There was just too much enthusiasm, too much support for me, too much of, the Montanans that I know and that I live with saying, hey, we really want our voice in Congress. Will you run again? And people were asking me that. And then when I announced, they were so excited. There was so much enthusiasm. We raised $750,000 in the first quarter that we announced, which was a big number. And we've had tremendous support ever since then. I know that we can win because the numbers are there. This is a Tester plus 10 district, these 16 counties. Senator Tester carried them by 10 points in the 2018 election if it had been a district. So the votes are there. I have to develop my brand, get my name out, and invest, and I'm doing that. So putting the miles on the road. I've been traveling this district in my minivan and put 30,000 miles on my minivan over the course of the last um, 8 months. I actually literally drove it into the ground. The transmission went out and I had to get a new one. So all of that was a part of the race, and I know that we can win it, and Montanans are with me, and I'm hearing that now. So our polls are good, our numbers are good, and we're doing strong. So we've set fundraising records, which that's the metric, unfortunately, that people measure candidate strength by. We set fundraising records in this race over the last 6 quarters that we've been raising money, and raised well over $1 million last quarter. So and our cash on hand is good. We're going into the, online advertising season from a very, very strong position, and we'll spend the resources that we need. This is also on the red to blue list. So we're one of the top pickup seats in the country. We were identified as in the first tranche of red to blue candidates. And so we've got a lot of support nationally for this race. The other statistic that I think is important is that I'll be the only Democrat between Seattle and Minneapolis and down to Denver. So that's a huge swath of the country that doesn't have a Democratic representative in the House. And look, we're watching right now what the House has absolutely failed to do. They've completely fallen down on the job. They didn't pass a budget bill last year until 6 months after the budget. I mean, they're just doing these band-aids. They can't effectively govern. This is a Republican majority. My opponent has been in government for 15 years at the highest level, always in the majority, always in the majority. And he hasn't delivered for Montana. He's done nothing to make Montana better. And they can't get a budget passed. And now they've recessed without getting a budget passed for next year. That's not okay. That's not effective representation. That needs to change. And people on the ground here in Montana agree with me on that. So we're going to get it done, and I'll be our representative in Congress, and we'll get some work done.
A lot to unpack in that answer. I do want to ask first, your relationship with Senator John Tester. I wonder if you think that his seat being up for reelection has sort of helped your campaign this time around, and are you working closely with his campaign?
Senator Tester being up for reelection means that he'll have resources to get out the vote in two major constituencies that were challenging for me last cycle because they are resource intensive constituencies, which is young people, the college campuses. We have the two major universities in this Western District, and in Native American, the tribal nations. The two of them are in this Western District too. So having the resources on the ground to get out the vote, having a coordinated campaign that really touches people over and over and over again, that is, of course, incredibly helpful. In Montana, you still have to run as your own brand. I mean, there just aren't coattails here. This was never a coattail race. I was never going to depend on somebody else. I'm running again on my own brand and for myself and to be my own voice in Congress. And that's what I tell people when they say, well, why should I vote for a Democrat? How are you going to be different from the National Party? I say, I'll call my mom. She'll tell you that I will never toe anybody's line. I'm an independent voice for Montana. I have been my whole life. I have my own law practice. I represent ranch clients across the state. I'm my own brand. Senator Tester helps me for sure. He's been a tremendous legislator and done really good things for Montana. He's been super effective. There's a lot of money that's available in Montana. And one of those was demonstrated in today's news. I'm not sure if you saw it, that some of the resources that are available to address what's happening with the drought and the wildfires and the impact of a changing climate. Those resources are available for Montana, and that's in large part because of the work that Senator Tester has done. So look forward to partnering with him and carrying legislation in the House that will advance the interests of the people here in Montana.
Speaking of your brand, you would be the first female Olympian to serve in Congress if elected. And of course, for an Olympic year, the opening ceremony quite literally kicks off in about an hour. So how would you translate your experiences, especially as an athlete, if elected into the House? What would be your main legislative priorities?
Well, first of all, what an incredible moment. The opening ceremonies of Parade of Nations. In 1996, people sometimes remember Muhammad Ali was holding the torch, that really iconic image of him holding the torch and his arm was shaking. I was standing in the infield in Atlanta watching him, and that was just such a powerful connection. And being in that moment, being in the Olympic Village, living in that global experience is such a powerful, powerful connection across the globe of what humans are capable of humans being at their best. So for me, this is just a moment that we really need right now that cries out for this. Let's be Team USA. There's so much that we can do and we do it together. So what are my priorities regarding sports? I mean, I think that we definitely need to have more women participating in sports. Title IX it gave my generation of female athletes an incredible opportunity to play and participate, and the work that we did was carried on by the generation after me. So I think, women need to be at the table, and that's what we've seen is when more people participate, America is better. And we see America at its best when we have people in the game, literally.
Well, Republicans this Congress especially have made the inclusion of transgender athletes in women and girls sports a big issue, and they claim their bills are in defense of competitive fairness and in the interest and safety of girls and women. So, as an Olympic athlete, what do you say to that?
I say, I don't need a whole bunch of white guys protecting me. I think that what they're saying is incredibly offensive. Like, oh, there, little girl, we're gonna let you play. We've been participating, we've been in sports, and you know, we need to make sure that it's fair. The playing field absolutely has to be fair. We should not have boys competing against girls, period. I know that. I've been into Olympics and I understand what fair competition means and is about. And I think it's just a lot of noise and culture wars because they can't win on the real issues. So they have to make up silly things that people don't even actually experience or care about. I have never once, not once in Montana, have I had one person come up to me and say, that's an issue that I care about and I need you to work on. Not one person has ever said that to me.
Mm. You also mentioned Title IX. Do you agree with President Biden's Title IX reforms that will take effect in the fall?
I think that the Title IX language is it was written and intended to have more women participate and be at the conversation and to learn how to compete and to play and to have conflict. And I think that that inclusion is really important. It's necessary, and that's what I support.
Beyond sports, what are your other legislative priorities?
I really am interested in and I care about conservation, our public lands, water. I think water is the issue going forward, and I've done water rights across Montana. So when we talk about Montana, I talk about our tremendous natural resources. We're a resource-rich state. We have winter peaking wind. We're a headwater state. We have the easternmost headwaters of the Columbia River Basin and the westernmost headwaters of the what becomes the Mississippi through Yellowstone flowing into the Missouri. These are really important resources that we need to think about right now in today's world. I mean, I'm sitting right now today in a power outage in Montana that's been going on now for multiple days due to a windstorm. So, the reality of the needs that we face on the ground in terms of resources, conservation, water, those are things that I've worked on in my career, and I'm really excited to dig into. The biggest immediate issue across Western Montana is housing. That is the issue that people talk about. So we've got a lot of people moving here because they like Montana too, no surprise there. But that's a big issue. I have a housing plan. I'm the only candidate in this race that has a plan to address the housing issue. I live in Montana. I have one house. My opponent, in contrast, doesn't live here and has as his address that he's registered to vote at. You can rent it as an Airbnb online. You can go online and get it right now as an Airbnb. So he's contributing to the problem, which is short-term rentals, which are driving up the prices and making it hurt for us here in Montana who really live here. We're being squeezed out. That needs to stop. I have a plan. I'll address it, and I will take that on day one in Congress.
I'm curious what your style would be like in the House as a Democrat in a mostly red state, especially when it comes to the issues of climate. I think the story that you told at the very top is very powerful, where there are some people who are still denying the effects of climate change or are not totally clear on the science behind it. So, especially if the House continues in Republican majority, would you be willing to reach across the aisle to pass your legislative priorities or only work among Democrats to push progressive policies?
I totally reject the idea of labels. This is a moment where we have to come together pragmatically to get common sense legislation passed to do right by everyone. And we need a functional branch of government. We need a legislature that can actually pass a budget, which Ryan Zinke has been totally unable to do. As far as the issues of energy go, that those have benefited Montana tremendously. And I'll give you one example. There is a county here in this Western district that has a tax base of $1 billion. They had a solar project get built there that had added to that tax base $500 million to that tax base. That's a big amount of money. These projects mean money for rural Montana. So we don't say no to money. This is investment in rural Montana. We have tremendous natural resources. The energy transition is here. We can make it work for Montana. Montanans can put it to good use. We have a history of exporting our natural resources and importing money. We're going to continue to do that through the energy transition. So for me, this is a moment that is incredibly exciting. It can bring investment to Montana. It can bring resources to Montana. And if, the folks in California want to buy our wind, well, we've got lots to sell.
Lastly, I want to talk about your thoughts on Vice President Kamala Harris being the presumptive nominee. What does her campaign mean to you, and what effect do you think it will have on down ballot races like yours?
Well, all of that remains to be seen. Look, I'm running for Congress in Western Montana. Like I said before, I've never been a coattails race. I was never coming into this as being lifted up by somebody else being on the ballot. I was always going to go get my 160,000 votes on my own effort. And I've been campaigning across Western Montana. I've put the miles on the minivan. I've connected with folks on the ground. I walk in parades. I'm out there talking to people every day. This is my race. This is my home. And everybody else on the ballot, good luck, go get them. Wish you the best, and let's get things done together. Let's beat Team USA, and I'm here to win this race on my own merits, as I've done everything in my life.
Actually, one last question. What are you looking forward to most in the Olympics? I know you're going to say rowing, but besides rowing, what else are you looking forward to?
Oh my gosh, watching the Olympics for me has just become this moment. So I sit with my three daughters, and honestly, I get kind of weepy. No matter what, somebody winning, somebody trying, and somebody swinging for the fences and coming short. It's just the human experience of people really trying to be their very best. And I think the Olympics, it shows us what we're capable of as humans. It shows us that we can aspire to be so much more. It shows us that we can be better than we are. And I love that sense of optimism and hope and drive and ambition all woven together. And that human experience to me, having lived it, I find deeply, deeply moving. And I sit there and cry and am moved, and I laugh and I cheer, and I mean, every moment of it for me, having been there, having walked with the athletes, having watched them, having celebrated, I get to relive it just a little bit in my own way now, and I love it.
Monica Tranel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Kat. Really appreciate your time.